Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today is a solo episode, and I have a topic I want to dive into, and that is something that I looked and I haven't talked about this yet, but I talk about it on my social media all the time, and it's a really important priority with all my coaching clients, and that's having a health first approach over a looks first approach. I'm going to dive into some examples, client story about some of this, and yeah, examples of both. But again, I think the one piece that people are missing are like this health first approach to fitness. I think it's everything is looks focused. And again, I think it's fine to get into fitness to have that kind of look, to change your look. I think that's great. But I think the issue becomes when that's like the sole focus and people just really grind towards that. And that's where I think things can become problematic from that standpoint. So I want to dive into this. So if you have a health first approach, you're going to improve your look as a side effect. I think that's the cool thing about this is if we take this from a health first approach, our look almost just as byproduct, your look is going to improve. So if we're focused on health things first, that's going to just lead to that. And again, I'll dive into what that looks like. But again, muscle gain and fat loss is just going to be easier. That's just what I have found with working with clients is when we take this health first approach, muscle gain and fat loss, it just is easier. It just happens, right? It's a byproduct of focusing on that. Whereas when a lot of people come to me, they have that looks first approach, and that leads to them like just feeling like muscle gain's really hard, fat loss is really hard, and they're just working super hard and not seeing their body change. Everything just feels like a grind. You just feel like you're working uphill. Everything, there's just more friction with what you do when we take this looks first approach there. And so again, if we have this looks first approach, I think the biggest reason is because you're likely to partake in protocols and strategies that aren't great for overall health, and they're just very short term. They're things that work in the short term, or they're strategies that maybe are like super advanced, and somebody who has their health down first would benefit more from that. Or again, more advanced for somebody who's an athlete, they have to perform in a certain sport, or bodybuilders, right? Again, I think we take a lot of information from what people do from bodybuilding, and I think that's a good place to look at, right? These are people that do a great job of maximizing their physique. It would be dumb to not take some information from them in terms of what they do. But people that don't do that full time and they're just getting into fitness or they haven't been into it too long and they try to apply those things. And I think that's where they get themselves into trouble. Or again, they're trying to take strategies that like somebody's trying to get super shredded for a bodybuilding show, right? Again, that's not realistic for most people, and anybody who gets super shredded for a bodybuilding show knows that you only do that for a short period of time and then you aren't there. But again, people see that and they think that's like a sustainable thing and what people look at like all the time. So I want to go over a few ways that what are some looks first approach examples. So first is you just doing crash diets to lose weight as quickly as possible. So it's, hey, I want to drop weight. All right, I'm just going to drop weight as quickly as I can. I'm just going to cut out this food. I'm going to cut out that food. And I just want to see that scale weight go down, right? So you're doing these crash diets. Anybody who's been there before knows that again, maybe it works for a little bit, but eventually you get to the point to where you're super tired, you're super hungry, you don't feel great, your energy levels are low, libido shot. And then it's no wonder you do that. And then you run into one kind of bump or plateau, and then boom, everything comes back on and you're worse off. So again, that's the first kind of approach example here would be doing these diets that again get you to cut out this, that, cut out certain food groups. And now you're just eating less overall. You're just super hungry. You're not really fueling your body. Again, that would be an example of a looks first approach because you're just doing something to get to a certain weight. You're not worried about what you have to do in that process. You're just worried about getting to that point. So again, that's that kind of looks first approach. And I just talked about how that can impact you and how long term it's not going to be great. Again, it's good to get, if you have excess weight, it's good to get that weight off. But again, if we're not doing it with a health first approach, it's going to be short term and your health is probably going to suffer even though you're dropping some body weight. So again, that would be the first approach. Second approach would be eating as much food as you can to gain weight and muscle. So then we have somebody on the opposite end of the spectrum. And I've been definitely on this one for sure, where it's, hey, I'm trying to get as big as I can, so I'm just going to force feed myself and just try to gain a bunch of weight. Again, what happens there is you're going for a particular look, you're trying to be muscular. And yes, you do need to eat enough food to build some muscle. But if we're just force feeding, we're trying to gain weight super quick, you're going to gain way more fat mass in that process. And you're just not going to be happy with your look. You're probably your health markers will probably decrease over time, especially the more weight you gain, the quicker you gain it. And you're not going to build as much muscle as you would want. Your gut health's probably going to be off in this process. You're going to not feel like eating more food, but you're just going to keep doing it because, hey, you have to get bigger. So again, that's another very common approach that I see people take with trying to gain muscle is just eating as much as they can and just really trying to see that scale weight trend up. Again, we're not paying attention to how your digestion is. We're not paying attention to how you're feeling. We're not paying attention to the food quality. We're just focused on seeing that scale weight go up and seeing that weight trend up. And that's like the only marker that you have. Again, that's a prime example of a looks first approach. And like I said, you're not going to build as much muscle in that process. You're going to have way more fat mass. You may run into gut health issues, right? Like for me, this was a big thing back in college when I was trying to gain weight. Is I would just eat. I was trying to, every time I weighed in, I wanted to see my weight be higher. I was having gut health issues, right? Like that showed up in my skin, that showed up just with just, again, stomach always rumbling, things like that, right? Those were some of the issues that I had from that perspective. But I think it definitely showed up in terms of my skin as well, too, right? I was suffering from a lot of acne at that point on my back, on my face. And again, that was just like, hey, I wanted to have a particular look. And so I just went for that, right? I wasn't paying attention to these other things. Again, and I think if gut health is off, like that's a sign that, hey, you're probably eating all this food and your body's not really absorbing everything. You're also just like continuing to just hammer it with more food there, right? So again, definitely an example of that. Third example here, and this is where a lot of people come to me at, right? I do have some people that come to me where they've done crash diets, right? And they're trying to fix that. They're trying to get better at dieting. I have some people that come to me that have in the past not done great from a building phase perspective. They maybe gained way more fat than they wanted. But then I also have this one where doing a bunch of training without focusing on recovery because you think that you will get to lose fat quickly or build muscle quicker. So again, this is somebody who you're probably paying attention to you're probably tracking your calories and macros. You're always probably trying to fat loss diet or whatever it is, but you're also just doing a ton of training and thinking that's going to be the thing that's like, hey, I just need to do more. I need to do more training. I need to do more cardio. I need to do more training volume. I need to do more exercises. I need to just push myself. I need to feel like I'm working super hard in my training. That's the thing that I'm missing. I need to do that. And because you're not focused on like your recovery outside the gym, you're not understanding how like sleep impacts your recovery. And if you're under recovered, you're going to be working hard, but you're not going to see that adaptation that you want to see, right? So again, it's like there's a ton of friction going on here in this process. You're working super hard and you just feel like you're going uphill. And it's because, again, you're not focused on things outside of the gym. You're not focused on the recovery. You're not focused on your health markers. You're not focused on your overall health. It's just, hey, I want to get to this particular look. I need to grind and I just need to push harder, right? Again, that's another example of a looks first approach. I can't tell you how many times I've seen this clientele come to me and continue to come to me. Again, there's nothing wrong if you do this. I totally get it. A lot of people that listen to this probably enjoy working out. And again, this can be something that you really try to do. But again, this isn't always the problem, right? Pushing yourself harder is not always going to be the solution there, right? There. And then another example would be just focusing on calories and not what they are made up of. So this is somebody who maybe you track your macros and calories and stuff, and you're still not seeing the change you want, but then you're not really focused on like the types of foods that you're eating, right? It's just, hey, I hit my macros. Why is my body not changing? And again, it could be because maybe you're not focused on food quality. Maybe you're not focused on getting in a good base of whole foods. And then obviously any of these other things that we talked about. So that's another kind of example of a looks first approach where, hey, we're just focused on calories and macros, and we're not focused on what that food is made up of, what foods you're actually consuming from that perspective. And we're not focused on the health side of things. So what this leads me to is a health first approach, right? So this is the approach I try to take with clients. So we obviously have strategies in place. Again, we want to make sure we're training hard enough at times. We want to make sure that the training we're doing is geared towards whatever the adaptation is that you're trying to get to, whether it's, again, most people I work with, they want to build some muscle, lose some body fat, and they want to be able to enjoy their life and maintain that long term, right? And so we have strategies in place that are going to help with that. Again, I talk a lot about how these things outside of the gym are super important, but I don't want to downplay the importance of having good training in place, what that looks like, obviously having the right calories and macros, but we also want to make sure we focus on how these things impact you. I guess also what I want to say on that too is this doesn't mean that we don't have periods of time where we maybe try to be in a calorie surplus. This doesn't mean we don't have periods of time where you're in a calorie deficit. This doesn't mean we don't have periods of time where you push your training and really try to, push yourself from that perspective, right? That's not what that means, but we are focusing on how these things impact you, okay? Because that's important. So again, what are some of these things that we're going to look at? So we're going to look at sleep, right? We want to make sure that you're getting good quality sleep. We want to make sure that you have good sleep hygiene in practice or good sleep hygiene practices. Because if you don't have that, again, you're going to be working hard and you're just going to fight this kind of uphill battle. So again, this doesn't mean that if somebody doesn't have great sleep that we're just, just don't do anything. No, that's not the case. That means now we're going to adjust our nutrition around that. Maybe that's not the time we're trying to really push push fat loss. Maybe it's a smaller calorie deficit. Maybe from a training perspective, instead of trying to push yourself 6 days a week, we're dropping down to 4, right? So we're working around these things. We're paying attention to them versus, hey, when the literature or because that professional bodybuilder does this, I don't care how much sleep you're getting, you need to work out 6 days a week. Again, if we're just focused on looks, that's where a lot of people will go. But again, we're with like, hey, sleep's not great. We need to make some adjustments to work with your body rather than against it, right? And I think that's a good way to sum up the health first approach is we're working with your body rather than against it. And obviously, we want to improve it over time, but we're working with it. We're going to look at your stress levels. Again, if these are super high, you have a ton of extra stress going on. Again, is that the best time to push your body to do 6 days a week of training, do 3 days of cardio, and also try to be in a calorie deficit? Probably not. So again, we're going to actively work on reducing your stress levels, managing those stress levels, and then we're going to adjust the training geared towards where that's at. But again, keeping track of your stress levels are super important. Again, with that looks first approach, okay, I don't care if I'm stressed, I'm just going to go. And I do see this a lot with this type of avatar where they have a lot of like mental type of stress from work, family life, whatever it is, and they're into working out. So they naturally they want to push themselves. They just naturally have that kind of mindset towards things. And they're the type of people that are just going to push through that. And again, I don't understand why I'm not seeing I don't understand why my libido's low. I don't understand why my testosterone levels are low. You're trying to do all this stuff when your stress levels are super high. I actually just got off a call with a guy who you know, he has his own business, at least part of it. He's super busy there. He's doing all this kind of endurance type training, also strength training. He just lost 30 plus pounds with his fat loss phase. And he did explain to me that his libido's low, sleep's not great. It's, man, I get you got to be in shape for this event, but it's like, you got to understand that you need to adjust your training intensity, training frequency, whatever it may be, just because again, like you're going to feel like you're battling this uphill approach. You're going to have this like uphill battle throughout if you don't start to address some of these things, right? So again, something like stress levels, something we want to look at. Another thing would be looking at your food quality, right? So again, this is where we dive a little bit deeper to, okay, cool, you're hitting your calories and macros, but what are the food choices we're making? Are these a lot of foods where it's just typically like your protein shake with, your Uncle Ben's rice and that's all you're having, right? So yeah, you're hitting your macros, high protein, getting your carbs in, but are you getting some fruit and veggies in? Are you getting some whole foods in? Are we getting, different sources of protein? Are we getting different sources of carbohydrates? Are we potentially missing out on any vitamins and minerals, right? So again, looking at going a layer deeper and looking at your food quality, because again, that's going to be super important as well too. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people that they think they're eating X amount of calories, and then you look at their food log and it's a lot of this type of food, or again, they're in a deficit, but then they're also battling hunger because again, it's these quick macro friendly type foods. And again, we want to find that balance there of having some of these foods in, but also having these whole foods, having a variety in your diet as well too, right? So again, looking at the food quality is super important. I do this through food logs, have clients track on Chronometer. So again, that's another example there of a health first approach. And again, most coaching for people who are looking to gain muscle, lose body fat, it's, hey, hit your macros, and that's all I really care about. But again, I like to go a layer deeper there and focus on that health side of things. Hunger, right? What are your hunger levels at? Again, it's, hey, you're hitting your calories and macros, but are you ravenously hungry throughout the day? If that's the case, again, we need to look at your meal timing. We need to look at your food sources, where are things coming from? Again, a common kind of thing here is, I heard high protein is satiating, but then when I eat high protein, it's, I'm still hungry. And then you look and it's mostly like protein powder that they're getting, right? Protein bars. It's like, these are good. It's going to help you get your protein. But again, probably getting in some lean sources of meat are going to be super important here, right? So again, looking at that. I mentioned this throughout, your digestion. This is super important. If you're constantly constipated, you're constantly bloating, you're either on one end of the spectrum where you always like your stools are always super loose and watery, or you're on the other end where they're super hard and it's not quality bowel movements, right? Again, we need to look into these things. If that's off, you can imagine that something along the lines is off, whether that your sleep is off, your stress levels are off, and these are going to be things that are going to impact your body's ability to recomp, adapt, and change. So again, we have to look at digestion as well too, making sure that's in a good spot and finding ways to make sure we're in a good spot there with that. So whether that be, hey, looking at your food log, you're eating a lot of processed type, low calorie type foods that could be causing some gut issues. So again, finding the right balance there. Maybe for you, certain amounts of dairy starts to impact your digestion. Maybe for you, it's, hey, we've been fat loss dieting for so long, we need to probably get some extra food in for a little bit, right? So again, you could see where if you're just taking this looks first approach, it's like, I don't care about this because I need to get to a certain weight or a certain look, and I'm just overlooking these things. Whereas if we take this health first approach, again, we're working with our body and we're listening to what it is telling us here. Again, we're looking at your recovery, making sure that you're not not just going balls to the wall with your training every single time you go in. Now, again, a lot of people struggle with having that proper intensity, but there's also a subset of people where if they are trying to change their body, they just push. And again, they're not focused on that recovery side of things. Looking at your energy levels too. If these are off, again, is it a sleep thing? Is it a food quality thing? Is it a meal timing thing? Is it, hey, you're pushing your training too much? Hey, we need to take a break from fat loss dieting, right? Because if you keep trying to push this, you're going to have these lower energy levels. You're going to be less motivated. You're going to start to make worse choices. And then boom, that's where you rebound. So again, looking at your energy levels is super important. And then libido too, right? Again, that can be a telltale sign of where things are at. If your libido's low, again, something somewhere along the lines is off, whether that be stress, whether that be sleep. Hey, maybe you've been in an energy deficit for too long. Maybe our training intensity is too high compared to what your recovery is. So again, paying attention to these things is super important. So that's how I take a health first approach with clients. But again, understanding that there may be certain phases in a client's journey where some of these might not all be maxed out, right? Again, somebody comes straight in, it's okay, you don't have to be absolutely perfect with all of these before we start to make any changes. Like I said, if we start to focus on these things though, you start to find that your body just naturally changes and it happens a lot easier. You almost can put in like a fourth of the effort and you see just as much as you did when you were putting in, you were spinning your wheels and working super hard. Again, like I said, the best way I can describe that is you're trying to run in sand, you're trying to run uphill, you're just in that constantly you're on that hamster wheel where you're just spinning, and you're not going anywhere. That's the best way I can describe that. But again, if these are always off, you do need to look into what you are currently doing. And again, maybe it is you taking a more health first approach. And that can be a tough mindset. It can be a tough kind of switch for people to get to this health first approach. But I guarantee you, if you start to focus on these things more, you'll start to see everything become more just responsive, less friction, right? And again, that's exactly what I try to do with my coaching, right? Hey, we want to change your body, but we also want to make sure that the health side of things are there, because without that, again, everything is just short term. And that's where I see people constantly just try to change their body. And again, it feels like they're working super hard. And then if they do actually change their body, they can never sustain it long term. So again, taking that health first approach is what I do with clients. So if you are interested in learning more about this, I have my free 30-minute strategy call. We can talk about how we can implement that health first approach into your routine and what that process looks like. But yeah, if you found this podcast to be helpful in any way, if you could leave a rating and review, that will help more people find it. Again, appreciate everybody who listens. Next, if you haven't yet, give me a follow on Instagram, Jeff. That's where I'm most active on social media. If you have any questions on anything I went over, you can always reach out there. And then I also have my free masterclass on body recomp, which would be a good supplement for what I talked about today. Again, that goes over the strategies that I implement with clients. Again, that's completely free. I also have my free masterclass on nutrition periodization, go over each nutrition phase, how to set it up, common mistakes, adjustments, everything you need to know about each phase. But that's it. Hopefully this episode was helpful and it makes you rethink your approach to changing your body and what that process looks like. Again, if you have any questions, let me know and I'll chat with you next time.